I'm not used to this, so we'll get by. I think this is really, you can call it long COVID, because Team Biscuits I started for the COVID period and was only supposed to last however long COVID was going to last. But here we are, I'm still doing Team Biscuits, and it seems to become well, I wouldn't say an institution, but it's getting that way. So thank you, Sloane, for squeezing the last bit of blood out of me before I travel home tomorrow. And it's my pleasure to just do a little Team Biscuits then, short Team Biscuits, but there's most probably no such thing as a short Team Biscuits. And that is, as you can see, we want to have a look at startle and surprise. And the idea being really is to try and prevent overreaction to benign indications in the cockpit, where the pilot will turn a non-life-threatening situation into a life-threatening situation by their overreaction. So I want to have a look at startle first, and then we'll just have a look at the surprise. They're two separate things. So startle response then is largely an unconscious defensive response. It's we talk about training people, knee-jerk reaction. We talk about training, making people a little bit quicker on their reactions. And this is one of the areas that we want to have a look at, is that we want to try and prevent the startle. We can prevent the startle, which can end up as an overreaction. Very famously, Sir Sterling Moss once said about a racing incident that, calling on all his years of experience, he froze on the controls. And so that was a startle response, triggered by a little item in your brain. In fact, there's two of them, an amygdala, which is a little switch, and that controls your emotions, happy, sad, fright, the fight or flight situation. And this is what we want to try and do, prevent the fight and flight situation coming into your flying. So it can affect the pilot up to 30 seconds. You can, I say, either freeze on the controls, or you can, as you would in a cinema, you can throw your popcorn over everybody by making a sudden, large, involuntary movement. So it's affected, there's this little switch here that operates the limbic system, and this is the switch that we want to try and prevent from activating. And we can do that by training. And the training we want to look at really is your reactions to, say, a light coming on in the cockpit. Currently, I would think, and I don't like to use large paintbrushes, but currently I think, generally speaking, in the industry, all we'll do is get blogs to tell us verbally what their response would be to a light or a problem in the cockpit. We want to stop doing that because it's unrealistic. What we want the instructor to be doing is actually giving the student or the pilot during a check ride a situation, and then get that pilot to fly the aircraft to a safe position on the ground. And I say a safe position on the ground because many years ago I had an engine failure in a Bell 47, and I picked this wonderful green field. No problem at all. Bell 47's got lots of kinetic energy in the rotor system. And it wasn't until I was about 2 or 3 feet off the ground that I realised that the ground was sloping upwards and I was going the wrong way. And so there again, I was surprised. And but with the Bell 47, you just raise the collective lever, and I just floated this Bell 47 up onto the flat surface at the top of this ridge. So we want the pilot to fly the aircraft to a safe position. And I want you to do it because if you haven't got anything to call on as a pilot when something happens in the cockpit, it's very, very difficult for you to know what to do. It's a bit like if I haven't taught you to go around on a bad approach, you've got nothing to call on. If I show you how to do a go around, then you'll go around and you'll stop trying to make an approach that becomes difficult, if not threatening. So that's the whole idea. So we want to try and prevent this switch from operating the limbic system that causes the fight or flight situation to kick in. So startle. I can throw my popcorn over people. So that means I can put very large inputs into the flight control system, and I can therefore start to get close to losing control. And of course, once I start losing control, then my stress levels go up. Things that I could easily do at a lower stress level become difficult, if not impossible, to carry out. Or the startle effect. Again, many years ago, Frank Robinson sent me across to Russia to try and reduce the number of accidents they were having with the product. In fact, actually it was twofold. One is to try and bring the level of engineers up, and the second thing was to fly with the pilots. And actually, it's a situation that there are a number of human factors that have come out of it since it's happened. But the main one was that I was teaching the guy auto rotations. They don't do auto rotations. They're ex-military guys. They do it at basic training, and then they never do one again after that. So I was doing auto rotations. And I briefed him. He doesn't speak English. I don't speak Russian. I had a young girl in the back that was doing the translation for him. And so off we went to do auto rotation. And this guy was pretty good. So I was relaxed, he was relaxed. So I thought, I'll just push it a little bit further. Things were going well. So I decided to show him a zero-speed auto rotation. And the idea being that I would kick the aircraft into wind and get blown backwards and then put the nose down, and then I will make the point where I want to land the helicopter. So I put it into auto rotation and he froze on the controls. Now he's an ex-military Chechen combat pilot, yeah, and he was now frozen on the controls. Now we were doing this just on the edge of Siberia, so there was snow, and I'd given myself recovery levels, etc., etc., and I just couldn't get him off the controls. And I talked to the girl in the back as calmly as I could. I mean, anybody done a zero-speed auto rotation, you know the rate of descent is quite high. And so I turned round and said to her as best I could that if I don't get control of this aircraft, we're going to hit the ground rather hard. And I didn't say non-survivable because I didn't want to upset her. She saved our lives. Nothing to do with me. No skill on my part at all. All she did was she reached forward and touched Igor on the shoulder. And at that point, he came out of it. So we always joke that if somebody freezes on the controls, you punch them on the side of the head. Well, perhaps not, you don't want to punch them on the side of the head, but actually the human contact to break that startle effect is actually what's needed. I can't tell you whether I recovered 1 foot off the ground, 5 foot off the ground, or 50 feet off the ground. But I'm here today because she reached forward and touched this guy on there. So I can tell you, startle actually happens. So, involuntary flight control. Yeah? What we don't want here is over-controlling. We don't want you freezing on controls. It is These are some of Sir Sterling Moss's steering wheels. So you can see he was still holding onto those steering wheels when he hit whatever he hit. Surprise! It's just an unexpected change to what is or was expected. So it's a mismatch. Okay, a light comes on. We want to reduce this to a surprise and not to an overreaction. Oh, no, I don't want to be there. Yeah, so I might stand on this side. It might help. So a clutch light comes on. We don't want you to tell us what you want to do. We want you to actually do something about it. Okay? You can tell us what you're doing whilst you're doing it. That helps. But we actually want you to fly the aircraft to a safe position on the ground. Engine chip light, same thing. I thought I could get some match turbine with piston engine. But the other thing that I'm very keen on is that how can you react to something like a light in the cockpit if you don't know the system behind it? The more you know about the system behind the light, the more likely you are to react correctly and not turn it into something that will endanger you or your passengers. So get to know the systems. The clutch system tends to give us a little bit of problems. Yeah, the light comes on as normal, 10 seconds or so, and then some procedure. And then the chip light for the RR300. You should know, in fact, Johnny was telling me a little story yesterday about being over the water in an EC120 when his main rudder gearbox chip light started to glow at him, and then it became bright. So he's now midway between Spain and Mallorca in an EC120 with the main rudder gearbox chip light on. So what does he do? What benefited John was the fact that he knew why the aircraft was in maintenance. He knows the system. He knows that they were doing some work on the gearbox, so he quite rightly took that into his action plan. And that is, he decided, rather than ditch the aircraft into the water, he would fly on based on the chances were that it was just some disturbed material in the gearbox and not actually a problem in the gearbox, which actually is what it turned out to be. So he saved an EC120 by having some knowledge of the system behind it. So various sort of lights now, we've got the 22, the 44 and 66. So get to know where they are, what they are, so you can react to them correctly. A lot of this stuff is just sitting in the cockpit and learning what lights are where. Lots of configurations now on the product here showing you the lights. But basically, all pretty much the same. You should be familiar with them. And just finally, how we do. Johnny, you were supposed to give me a 5-minute warning. Many years ago, sitting down with Frank Robinson having lunch, and the new R44 was coming out, so the Astro had played its part, and the new 44 with the hydraulic system was coming out as standard, and sitting opposite Frank, we were just talking about the various things on the new R44. And I said to Frank, the first R44 was an R44 Astro. He said, well, have you thought about the new R44? What are you going to call it? He says, well, I don't do that until a little bit further on before the announcement. And I said, well, the first one was an Astro. Why don't you call the second one a Bistro? Yeah, and he stopped eating, and he looked at me and said, Dick, you are an idiot at times. And he carried on eating and stopped about 30 seconds later, looked up and chuckled. He didn't laugh, He jumped and then carried on. So, for some reason, it was called the Raven, and not a bistro. But in a parallel world somewhere, this is Jesus. Come on. Bear with me. See, technology doesn't like it. In a parallel universe, we'll get there eventually. There is an R-44 bistro flying around. Yeah. And dare I say it, many years later, Kurt Robinson asked me for my opinion on what they were going to call the new R-66 with the fence. And I said, off the top of my head, Kurt? He said, well, we're interested about anything. And I said, well, why don't we call it the R-66 Titanic? He put the phone down. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand you back over to George.
A number of years ago, best part of 50 years ago, my father, David George, was living in California. And there he met a quality engineer who, you might guess, is called Frank Robinson. A year later, he became the first international dealer for Robinson helicopters in the world in 1976. This was almost a decade before I was born, so I'm going to hand it over to someone who's actually there, and I welcome my father to the stage to say a few words on the earlier days between Sloane and Robinson, the building blocks of this partnership we've had for close to 50 years.
Thank you, George, and thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for coming, and particularly to David for coming. Just wonderful weather. I told him it rained every day, and it really appears to. George said, I will say a few words on the history because I'm probably about the oldest person in here, and I would be one of the few who'd remember what really did happen. Frank, I first met in 1975. And he just started this project about the R-22. And he had a first flight actually that particular year. And he had a backer then who no one knew anything about, this fellow called Gus Lafayette. He made all the parts for Robinson on his little island in Kauai, and he flew them over. So it was a lovely story. And we eventually got our first helicopter here in 1979. And things were going fairly well until May the following year, when they had a blade delamination, which unfortunately caused the death of 2 people. And the FAA at that time overreacted, to my mind, but still they grounded all the R-22s. And so there was quite a bit of panic because there were banks involved, and Frank Robinson called what he called an emergency meeting. So off we went over there, and I met my Australian counterpart, Lindsay Edmonds, who we've been friends for 50 years now. And we could see what was going to happen, so we both decided we'd buy up a whole bunch. So we bought 12 each and paid deposits on 12 each. The banks decided, oh, that's okay then. And we've still got a Robinson Helicopter Company. And moving on sort of where we are now, we've sold over 500 Robinsons, 512 I think it is here. It's a brilliant machine. We had our best year was in 85 when we sold 1 in 3 of what the factory produced. And we've had a variety of dealers here, and it's a sad situation because the more dealers they appoint, the less helicopters are sold. And I've been speaking to David earlier today, but it's very clear that having multiple dealers means that no one actually tries to sell the product. So we've reacted to that. We have a new managing director who just met. We have a new Robinson salesman who we took on about 6 months ago. We brought forward, we've taken a number of delivery slots forward, which we had to pay for, in order to be able to supply the product to the customer. And so we're going to go and really go for that market that we used to control, and hopefully we'll do well at it and the others will disappear. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming, and I think David's going to say a couple of words. He just pass you George for a second. Thank you.
Thanks for what we do.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and Marie again.
I'm going to put my water over here. So first, thank you, George. Thank you, David. Sloane is obviously our longest international partner in all the many things that Robinson's achieved. We owe a lot of it to the team at Sloane. So part of the reason why this was one of the first trips that I wanted to make after taking over to really see what's needed in the market. What do we need to do to adapt and to be more successful satisfying our customers? First, I want to say that as a student of aviation, the UK is such a great region, and I love today I've gotten to see the airfield, and George showed me around Sloane's facility here. You're so lucky to have this great treasure in the region, and we want to be a part of that going forward. So I think one of the big focuses for us on these trips is to find out what you need. So later in the presentation, I'm interested in questions that you have. But I always get a few questions, and I want to highlight kind of the priorities of Robinson since I took over in March. We have a great opportunity where we've been investing in product development, things that you're going to see in the short term that we'll be able to share more in the coming months. Areas where we can offer more products for you to field and use in your businesses or your personal lives. We're also working very hard to improve our customer service. So you'll see in the last couple of months we've brought on a couple of additional team members that are focused on satisfying customers on things like parts and warranty claims and making the entire process of owning a Robinson a more enjoyable experience. And I know that if not for the great work of our dealers around the world, it isn't always an enjoyable experience. Sometimes we're too quiet, sometimes we're too reserved, sometimes we stay too close to kind of our California facility. But you're going to see us more active and more involved in all the various regions where we have great customers like yourselves. So you'll meet us again, you'll see my team more frequently out here. We're coming back in a couple weeks for European rotors. You'll see both my marketing team, you'll see our customer service team, but we aim to be a part of the aviation ecosystem here, and it all starts here in the UK. So super excited to be here. I also want to introduce in the crowd Tuan, another team member from the Robinson team. We get a lot of questions about the future of aviation, and you're going to see us become more active in that as well. We're proud of our heritage and all the past things we've done, but we have this great opportunity where technology is allowing us to do more sophisticated things with the aircraft. Tuan's role in our organization is to lead our electrification efforts, with the idea that in the future you could have fleets that are using the Rolls-Royce and the Lycoming engines that you see today, but also they could be augmented by hybrid solutions, full electric solutions, things that give our customers more options. Those are very challenging technologies, so it takes a consistent effort and investment. So this is not something that likely we'll see in the next several years, but you're going to see development in the next several years, and Robinson will be leader in it. So that's one of the other questions we get a lot of is what's the future look like? Well, you've probably seen a couple things. We've invested already in a company we acquired, an unmanned systems company, with the intent of helping our helicopter operators have more tools in their toolbox. So you're going to see demonstrations in the months ahead of Robinson helicopters with our unmanned drones launched from those aircraft so that it will help to accelerate search and rescue missions. In the US right now, there's about 60 aircraft that are helping with the hurricane relief that you guys may follow over here, but there was a massive really surprising flood that happened in the United States. And since then, a private fleet of Robinson owners has really been the backbone of the relief efforts for that aircraft. And our unmanned aircraft will help that in the future, make those search and rescue missions and the medical relief efforts faster. So that's one of the areas we've been investing in alongside of our electrification efforts. We've also been making investments in autonomy or improved autopilots, improved flight controls. So you'll see more from that perspective. The future is really bright with what can be done to help make the pilot workload a lot easier and more manageable. We will be leaders in that as well. My VP of Engineering, who took over for the legendary Pete Riddell, who did all the hydraulics that David mentioned on the R-44 and developed the 66, all that was Pete's doing. Pete retired late last year and passed his leadership on to Sean Doyle, who came out of a long history at Garmin, developing autopilots for helicopters, developing avionics for helicopters. So we've made the right talent investments to make Robinson a brand that will dominate the next 50 years. So we're really proud of the legacy here in the UK, and I look forward to your questions. And there's nothing too small or too challenging. We always get questions sometimes that are difficult. I want to hear those too. Maybe afterwards, or if you're brave, you can certainly step up and ask any question that's on your mind. Jeremy.
You've extended the life of certain training on the R66, what's wrong with you go on extending more further, but asking for another.
Yeah, so I'm a very transparent person, so I'll tell you what I know about. On the R-44, right now we have the approval to extend the calendar life of the blades. That process has to go through one last step to get it published. So we're working through that right now, and so you'll see the extension of the calendar life on all Robinson blades in the future. The R-22 is a step that requires a regulatory action, so we're working through that. But I think overall, you're going to see more from us that is trying to drive cost out of operating our aircraft. One of the things that was near and dear to Frank's heart was the reason why he kept costs so affordable was he felt that it helped to drive the market growth. If costs continue to climb and people can't predict the cost to operate their aircraft, they're less likely to invest, they're less likely to grow their business. So we see that exact same perspective. We're trying to drive cost out of our products, even in a time when the input costs sometimes are increasing. So you'll see more of that from us, that R66 decision to effectively double the lives on the product, do all the testing, do all the qualification to give the customers that value, and really pass that on to the customer. I mean, we in the process, we had some changes. We had to incorporate a few cost increases that we had, but really, on the whole, it really cut the price basically in half on those parts from an operating per hour perspective. So those kinds of things you're going to see from us. I can't make promises about specific parts. It is always a challenge to get through the regulatory process, but it is a priority for us to keep driving costs down. Yes, Gideon.
David, you have the FAA certification of a horizontal stabilizer, the symmetrical horizontal stuff. How's that coming along with the EASA certification?
Yeah, so one of the things about regulations, always unpredictable, always surprise you. So we had EASA come and visit earlier in the summer and do flight testing, but the first thing we had to do was train the pilots on Robinson aircraft. They all came, of course, out of local CAAs on the European side that were primarily twin-engine, large aircraft helicopter pilots, so they had never flown in a Robinson. So it took quite a while to familiarize them with our aircraft, to get them comfortable doing the eventual testing of the stabilizer. They had to know what the original felt like too, so they had to fly a lot of time in the old design as well. So time was spent getting them familiar and through the process. Just recently, we kind of reached agreement with a couple of remaining items, and those were items that were unrelated to the stabilizer. They were items that were really from the original validation of the 22 and the 44 that were holding back those processes. So we reached an agreement, so we're pretty confident that we will get certification very soon. The CAA's validation of that is less clear to me, but that is a priority and one of the things. Yes, sir. Yes, I always get the question of new products. So I'll tell you first, Robinson, the recipe of Robinson is valuable at larger and larger categories. So we will, over time, fill the major competitive spots on the map. I can tell you there's a number of ones that lend themselves to single engine applications, and long term, I could see us getting into multi-engine as well. But in the near term, what Richard's sort of hinting at is something bigger. I would just say pay close attention to Robinson. We're being active in sharing what we do, so marketing it and messaging it. When the time is right, it will be absolutely easy to see the performance data, especially before you buy another product. So my hope is that folks have the information they need to make a good buying decision, and in short order too. So if you're buying in the next few months, just hold on. Oh. Yeah, so, yeah, good question. I think the manufacturing methods that we use, we really believe in, and it's allowed us to grow and scale dramatically. So Richard was asking about composites. We will use composites, but honestly, I had a 20-year career with Textron, and I watched a lot of advanced materials make their way into aircraft, and the performance just kept getting worse. So the aircraft got heavier and heavier the more advanced materials you use. So it's not as simple as, selecting materials and trying to sort of push those into a product. So you'll see from Robinson largely similar structures and similar approaches, but there will be some advanced materials applied just very smartly. I'm an engineer first, and so that drives me probably more than anything else. Any other questions? Any brave souls in the audience? Well, I'll end with this. I think this is the beginning of many visits. You'll see me here at the facility. You'll hear see my team. We want to be accessible to our customers, and so if there's anything that you need, please reach out. I've got business cards, and I'll share with anybody who is interested. We want to hear what you need in future products. We want to hear what you need in customer service and support. So please reach out. We really do want to hear from you and help you through any challenges you face with our product or any other. Thank you.
I think I speak on behalf of everyone here, and I thank you for your candor, your openness, and it's something that we haven't always seen, and we're thrilled to see new talent, new ideas, and promise of new products coming from Robinson. So it'll be exciting to watch, maybe not European Motors, but maybe early next year at a conference out in Dallas.
Soon.
Exactly, see what happens.
Yeah.
So I think that's almost us coming to a close today, except for one more thing, which is for the timed arrivals competition. So I have a glamorous assistant with booze. And first up, I'd like to welcome in reverse order Jeremy James, who is still here. Richard, you are now the winner of an excellent bottle of champagne. Next we'll get Bob Vassar, the team from Heli Centre, who flew in Tango Romeo. And finally, and this is a controversial one, Jeremy Taylor, who flew in an airplane.
There you go.
Well done,
Thank you very much,
Congratulations.
David.
Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you, David.
Yep.
Well done.
Thank you. George.
Surprised you found sale with it, and then time.
Thank you very much, everyone. As David said, we're available for Q&A, or if you want more informal questions, feedback. Both us and Robinson are open and want to hear what you have to say. So thank you very much, and the last is
I'm going to go down this again.
Yes, that's probably sort of.